Hi everybody, it's Michelle with Michelle Newell Photography, and I'm going to show you how I go about editing the potato sack shot and how I layer and remove what I don't need. So as you can see, I have my two images up in Photoshop, and I'm going to take this image and put it on top of that one. And all you do is you come up here, select this tool, hold it down, so left click, and then just drag and drop it, and that's going to create a new layer. So I'm going to close that because I don't need it anymore. And as you can see, this is floating around. And the bottom image is going to be the final image. So I want his face to be part of the final image. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the opacity and bringing it down to about 45, and I'm going to line up their eyelids just so that they're in the same spot. And so you can kind of see that. I'm going to bring my opacity up a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is erase with my eraser this left side. So I'm going to turn it up all the way just so I can see what I don't want. Actually, I'm going to erase this right side, pardon me. And I'm just going to erase away I don't need. Oops, bring my opacity up so it goes away. And being really careful not to go over on this side, on the left side. As you can see, his head is changing a little bit, so I'm going to fix this. Make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm just going around and erasing that portion. Actually, we're going to go back just a little bit. Let me make my brush a little bit smaller. And it's pretty simple, so I'm just erasing what I don't want. So that gives me a clean background on the left side. And I'll need to fix her finger because her finger came over a little bit. So that's pretty good for now. And so if I turn this layer off, on and off, you can kind of see it. There's a few other spots I need to erase. I'll fix that little spot by his ear. But that way his face is completely good. So you can see that. Let's go back on there a little bit more. Alright, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to merge these two layers. So right click, merge layers. And I'm going to zoom in to 100%. And we're going to get rid of this area right here. If I had noticed that her finger was sticking out while we were shooting, I would have had her tuck her hand back in. So I'm just taking my selection tool, going right around his ear. Pull it out just a little bit more. And I just want to select part of the blanket and then his ear. Everybody has a different method of doing things. This is just how I found it easy to do my way. So I'm going to adjust the edge, and I'm softening or smoothing that and then feathering it just a little bit. And then I'm going to shift the edge to go out so it's not taking away part of his ear. Anyway, so what I was saying is everybody has a different method of editing. This is just how I do mine. So we're going to use the clone tool, which is this right here, and I'm selecting the area that I want. And then I'm just going to make my brush a little bit smaller and then go right back over that. Right by his ear. So as you can see, he looks like he's sitting up, and my blanket's bugging me on each side. So what I'm going to do is just kind of clone that down. It's a little spot on my blanket. So I'm just going to show you kind of how I would go about editing the rest of this photo. So I'm just cloning that blanket down a little bit so it's not so prominent. And then just, whoops, and letting it fade. And I'm going to use the paintbrush tool as well to kind of fade out that background. I still want the shadows to be there, just to kind of show the dimension of everything. If it feels too flat to me, it just feels fake. I mean, we're already doing a ton of editing. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to take my paintbrush, select in here, get a kind of more of a taupey color, and then bring my opacity down to about 30%. And what I'm going to do is kind of paint the blanket just a little bit, just to make it a little bit softer. And the background. Just kind of go around here, doing it a little bit quicker than I normally would, so that's pretty good. And now what I'm going to do is just edit his face just a little bit so you can kind of see how I do that. I use my spot healing brush, and I just go around real quick and just kind of clean up any redness on his face. If there was anything permanent like a birthmark or anything like that, I don't edit those out. Some babies are born with a stork bite and they get like a red blotch right between their eyes. I might bring the color down on it, but I don't remove it completely because that's something that's generally permanent. They sometimes go away, but sometimes don't. So I don't really want to remove it completely because I wouldn't want the child later on to go, wait a second, where'd my stork bite go? So he's frowning just a little bit, so I'm using my clone tool just to kind of even out the color and how his brow is, so it just doesn't look like he's furrowing his brow so much, and lightening those tones that are on his eyelids. And then same thing over here. And again, I'm just using my clone tool. I have it at about 40% opacity, and I'm just evening out some of his skin tones. It's just a quick and easy way just to get things cleaned up on their skin. So that feels pretty good. And I'm going to fix the blanket just a little bit more. Again, I'm using my clone tool and bringing it up to about 65% opacity, and I'm just going over the areas that I just kind of want. Actually, I'm going to go to 100%, just so they don't feel so distracting. And then what I'm also going to do is go into my liquify tool, and I want to just fix his, whoops, that's not the liquify tool. I want to fix kind of how he looks when he's sitting in the little potato sack, so it feels more like he's upright. So I'm just going to squish this in a little bit, and so it doesn't feel so large. And then I'm also going to take this down a little bit. fix that when we go back. Same thing over here. And then I'm also going to pull this down so it feels more like he's sitting in there. So just a quick little way to manipulate the wrap, depending on how thick you get it. Sometimes it can be so thick that it just kind of engulfs the baby, but this is a really good way to smooth that all out. So that looks pretty good. And then what I want to do as well is fix his wrap to feel like there's no crease. So again, I'm going to use my clone tool, go down here, select what I want, and then just remove that crease. And I'm also going to fix this. Just to bring it down just a little bit more. And then if I wanted to, I could also take my, go ahead and just crop it down a bit. Oops. Don't do that. Reset my crop. There we go. So hold your shift key down and then move him to be kind of right where we want him to be. Feels pretty good. So that's kind of how I go about doing the potato sack. I've got a few actions that I generally run, like my skin smoothing action, just to kind of go over his skin just a tad. I don't like to, whoops, I don't want them to feel too plasticky, so I'll just do a real minimal amount of skin smoothing. So I have it set to about 20% opacity, and I just go over it just slightly. Just a little bit. And we can zoom in on his face just so you can kind of see it. So before and after with the skin smoothing action. It's real subtle. Perfect. So that's kind of how I go about with the potato sack shot. Anyway, I hope this helped you figure out how to go about editing. And yeah, enjoy!